It's really rare to come up across a piece of pop media that has such a profound impact on me, and I think communicates a powerful truth about the world that we live in and the options that lie in front of us. I, short while ago, finished reading the manga of the Promised Neverland, and I also watched those seasons of the anime. And so I feel that if you're ever to watch any piece of media from Japan, this might be one of the most significant ones, and one that may prove to be of great value in terms of teaching, right? Teaching symbolic truths. And so, spoiler warning. There are certain elements that I think that spoiler warning. There are certain events or plot developments within the story that I will speak of and use them to illustrate certain thoughts and ideas, right? Particularly captured in Guy Standy's book, The Precariat. And in case you don't have access to the book, there is a series of lectures by Dr. Laurie Johnson on her YouTube channel covering the material in the book. And I might even draw a bit from elite theory, right? And so if you go to Skeptical Waves channel, you might find some stuff. Okay, you will find some stuff on Gaetano Mosca, and those will be the two, say, primary resources that I'll be making use of in order to make my point. And so, yeah, so these are the videos, understanding the precariat, and the series of lectures. So hopefully it be of value and of use to you. Okay, so guys standing. Well, I find these ideas, right, to be quite useful. He explores a class that he describes as a precariat. I think rather than just describing classes as upper, lower, or middle class, he posits a different class structure, which I find to be quite interesting and more accurate to describe the current state that we're in. So in this book he also explores certain issues that we have in the modern society, right? The fate of our fate as just-in-time humans, right? He explores why people in the West particularly cannot find good jobs, right? And I think that's increasingly true in the East African context. Why is a university degree is not enough, right? What's the role of migration, and does it affect underemployment, right? And are we multitasking ourselves to death? And so those are the key ideas that I think he provides to us, and I think it's I agree. I'm persuaded by his argument and his case, right? Not the solutions, but how he makes sense of the problem. Now, one thing I'd like to point out is that in looking at the different countries, seeing the complaints that people are having, or rather seeing the complaints that people are making about what are the issues with the political social order that they're living in the modern world, right? We find that we have the same complaints, but then it's happening in different nations, right? And I think that we have one regime that is operating within multiple nations, right? And this regime, I'm even including criminal networks and corporations as to be part of this megalithic network, right? And not in the sense of a one world government, right? But nodes of influence and power that overlap and cooperate, right? So I'm not expecting the billionaire drug cartel leader of a Mexican origin to be in the same room they're discussing policy and investment, right, with the head of the FBI, right? I think it's unlikely, not impossible, but I think it's unlikely. So rather we've got these networks, and then they're operating under this infrastructure. So this infrastructure that's allowing them to network and to operate, like to launder money, to make investments, move money across different shores, right? The different laws and organizations, right? So if you think about even how the structure by which many really wealthy people use to preserve their wealth, right? So you've got the company that's doing trade in one company, then it sends money to another holding company in a different country with the different laws, and that will send money to another company that is a trust fund. So basically, it like be a bank. The bank will be the trustee, and the trustee will give money to the beneficiary, who is the wealthy person, right? And so tax, like I said, so that's in terms one way that a really wealthy person can escape paying taxes, right? Not like escape. Okay, they can still pay taxes, right? But this is a way that they can reduce the amount of wealth that can be taken via the use of legislation, right? And because a trustee or like a trust fund is a legal entity that doesn't die with the person who set up the trust fund, right? What happens is that inheritance taxes don't come into play and things of the sort. But then that's I think I've talked a bit too much about what I'm conceiving to be the regime, right? So it's a network with institutions and infrastructure, right? And it's operating within multiple nations, right? If you look at the debate, contrasting the debate between Peter Hitchens and Owen Jones in the UK, right? Seeing the debate between Michael Marlis and Michael Knowles from the USA, the various investigations of slave culture in South Africa, or even with Julius Malema, how he got kicked out of the ANC, right, with the comments he made about the BDP in Botswana, right? You look at some of the issues with money laundering and tax evasion in different parts of the globe, and then even seeing some of the network and the flow of the money, right, where that some organizations or some individuals benefiting from resources from Venezuela, right, and that having connections with Russia, China, Cuba, Uganda, and Turkey, right, to something to do with gold and things of the sort. So there are all these accounts of what's going on a global scale, right? And I think that this is setting the stage as to, it's basically different facts that we can theorize why we're living in the Promised Neverland, right? Why I think that there are parallels between the world that the author of the Promised Neverland paints for us and the one that we actually live in, right? On one end, the parallels that I can identify is one that there is a false hope, right, and violence, right, being used to maintain power. And so, spoilers, right? So you've got the protagonists of the story, right? They're living in this, it seems like a paradise, right? And they're being raised, and then they're the cream of the crop, they're the smartest and the brightest, right? And once they discover that it's a false hope, and actually they're being raised to be food for a species that feeds off really intelligent human beings, right? For them, it's a problem and something they don't want, and they seek to escape. But then the response to their rejection of the false hope is the use of violence. So you see there's manipulation and control, right? And also there's the whole idea of like a good environment for elites in order to exploit their mental faculties, right? But then it's for the purpose of feeding the regime. So if I take the Promised Neverland, the demons, right, that is the regime, and then the children are a set of elites, right? So they are raised and they're taken care of so that they can reach peak elitistry, right? Elitism, no, that doesn't work. Okay, the goal is to raise them to the peak powers so that they can be fed on by the demons, right? And then those who do not get with the programs have to be destroyed. And then there's all this idea of hidden masters, right? And I think also the whole idea of a maternal state embodied by the mother of the farm, right? So she's raising all these children and she's calling them, they're calling her mother, but what she actually is mothering them for the purpose of their consumption by the regime itself, right? And I think that would also mirror the way we find these different social welfare movements forcing governments to pay the cost of dysfunction generated by corporations, right? Or even this entire network. All those things seem to, for me, as an effort to control the populace, right? To somehow mitigate the unrest and dissatisfaction that people feel about the political and the social order. So we're reorienting social forces, right? And then now you find yourself like with the conflict of the story whereby you've got the industry, right, that has been established and the community that people wish to live in, right? And I think that's our choice is actually between the farm and the family. And so I think the regime sets the political reality of the people that wants to participate in its economic network to live as if they're in a farm, right? But then the ideal human existence, the way that humans thrive and grow is within the family context, right? And so co-opting the family to make it into a farm of economic units for the regime is what I see as a parallel between the two stories, right? And that thing of co-opting community and you make them the raw material for your industry in terms of labor, then that becomes the issue, right? And in particular, it struck me because of the education reforms of this year that an acquaintance told me about the changes that they were making in the Kenyan education system and the rationale behind it, right? And with I'm drawing it from then that's in 2021. Guy Standing writes his book in 2011, right? And we found that whole idea about making people interchangeable economic units, right? And that also being tied to the value of your degree and affecting the value of your degree. And therefore, let's say the corporations want students from universities, like any student in university who can come into their company and do the job. And that it's a bit different from the way humans used to build their societies and their communities, right? So the objective now is about having marketable employees, right? You want people to be marketable. But then in the past, people used to be initiated into an institution or an organization, right? Of the idea of the guild, and they would learn mastery and they master their craft, right? And also you find that the corporations want to shift the cost of creating employees to the government and to the citizens, rather than them bearing the cost of making sure the people that work for them are the ones who have the skills that are necessary, right? And ironically, since the best way of mastering a craft is doing the craft, requiring that to happen before the business is a bit odd, isn't it, right? And so it's like corporations are forgetting that proficient, competent employees are supposed to be their responsibility, right? On the other hand, mentored, educated, sound thinkers is what the university is gunning for. And so if you don't have a ready-made employee at the end of like campus of the education, it's no surprise because they were not doing the craft in the actual environment, right? Or on the other end, you could think about like public education system would have a goal of having an informed citizenry, right? But then now here the government is supposed to produce marketable employees rather than informed citizenry, right? And you see, notice also, guys, Sandy, noting how the university shifts from being an institution that is dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge to become an institution that's about the creation of skilled workers, right? And so drawing the parallels of the Promised Neverland and the political reality, particularly described by Guy Standing, it serves like the solutions that the protagonists paint in the Promised Neverland, I think also mirrors what we can imitate in our own lives. What does it take to escape the grasp of the demons? How do you escape their power and their influence? How do you escape their control? What steps do you need to take in order to be able to no longer be subject to their manipulation or their violence, right? And therefore you find that the people in the farm decided to form stronger families, stronger community. They decided to build parallel institutions together that allow them to operate outside the provision of the regime. And even though they had great prosperity and they lived good lives prior to them being eaten, it does not compare to the joy and the camaraderie and the lives that they were able to live once they broke free from the regime and they built their parallel institution, they built their community, and they built their own local economy. And so why are we living in the Promised Neverland? Is because we are raising our children to become interchangeable economic units for the sake of the regime. Consider the issues that your country is dealing with just because they want to be connected to the international network. Think about the problems of brain drain, right? Why are the best minds of your people walking away from your people? Right? And so Hopefully this will be on value, and hopefully it could trigger your mind, and you'd start thinking of certain ideas of how you can start divesting yourself from the regime, right? What other options can you create for subsistence for you and your people, right? Is there a place that people can forage and perhaps hunt that you guys have created? What about food? Do you guys have maybe some place where people can grow like trees or things that you'd want to eat? Permaculture, right now. What about education, right? You don't want your children to be brainwashed to become servants of the regime. You don't want your child to become the next mother in the Promised Neverland sense. You want your children to be able to live good, prosperous, and joyful lives.